Chapter 2. It is written in the ruins of the great book of magic eloquently. The translation is more to the point. The quickest way out is through. I first learned this lesson with my adoptive father, Arnis. As I aged in the orphanage, I was discovered to possess the talent for casting. I was immediately adopted by a master of the college and incorporated into the youth schools. It was an early summer morning, and the cold of spring air lingered. Sun shafts cut through the forest. Dew blanketed the ferns. I recall mist evaporating from the shore of the lake and the call of the birds. Father, as I called Arnis, had a test in mind for me, one of which I was not aware of. All students of magic are gifted in memory, and if concentrating, images can be recalled with exacting detail. "Boy," Arnis drew my attention away from a strangely colored mushroom and handed me a map. "You have 5 seconds. Not a surprise at this point. I was 8 years old, and I had been under the care of my new parents for some years. I had grown used to being tested, and rather eager to prove my skills. I worked systematically, focusing on the top left corner of the parchment, and working my way to side all the way down. Much detail was used in Alphen cartography, given our ability to see as a bird does. The picture before me was of an island, circular in shape, and we stood at the southern end, from what I could tell. The lake was an excellent landmark. Father snatched the map from my grasp, and it erupted in a ball of flame. He grabbed my small wrist and placed 3 objects in my hand, closing my fingers around them. Then he kissed my forehead. "Do not disappoint me, son. You have 12 hours to meet me at the north side." He stepped backward and into the mist of the lake, which swirled around him. Then he vanished. He didn't need to tell me that I would be left for dead on this remote island with no hope of rescue were I to fail this test. One glance through the trees, and I could see distant the Riffian mountains beyond the sea. We were far, far from home. I recollected the map, using sticks to mark the sandy shore. The island could be traversed along the beach and cliffs that made up its perimeter, though its dense vegetation would slow me. It would be a day at least before I made it to the north side. I opened my hand and looked to the objects Arnis had placed there. A sweating cube of ice, a bone of unknown taxonomy, and a piece of thread. Curious. I looked to my map again, noting the 2 major landmarks on the island. This beautiful lake before me, and a menacing mountain chain. I glanced at the ice cube, and the lake itself. The quickest way out is through, my studies had told me the night before, as if by design. I smiled, my genius at times frightening. I pocketed the thread and bone and stepped toward the water. My feet grew chilly, not from submersion, but from my boots stepping onto frozen water. As I moved, the lake froze, building me a path across its calm surface. Father had been generous. I felt the ice reducing in my palm, and figured I would have enough to reach the other side and beyond. Perhaps he had suspected I would puzzle on the challenge longer. Not Sovos, no. Even at this young age, I was wise. My first obstacle over with, I bushwhacked my way through the forest. Summer temperatures were not friendly when the sun had no clouds to filter its rays. I began sweating and contemplating the bone and thread. This challenge would be over quickly, were I able to assume the shape of a bird, but flight is not practiced until 12, the last year of youth school. I had learned many movements of land animals, often looking like a newborn fawn as he or she attempts his or her first steps. With much practice, I had grown used to walking and running on 4 legs. I hoped this bone would help me summit the mountain in such a manner. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a twig snapping underfoot. I did not slow my pace, stop, or let it be known that I had heard. Best to keep attackers unaware of what I knew. The twig breaking would not have been detected by a normal sensing Alfman, but those with the talent had uniquely heightened senses. I continued on, and it wasn't another 20 minutes before I heard another snap. Another mistake on the part of my pursuer. Whomever it was, he was keeping a distance. My mind was active, considering what species of man or beast might seek me out here, and for what reason. Bandits, rapists, and savages were not known to Alfheim. Was this one of Father's tests? Would he import a rapist? No. I had no defenses. This must be a mammalian challenge, a wolf. Another snap, this time closer. My feet quickened against my will. A bone and a thread, my only weapons. I walked briskly now, tripping over myself once, as the wet bark of a decayed log slothed off upon the planting of my foot. It sickened me. Would that be my skin soon? The muscle and tissues falling off of my bones as the predator ate me? I stumbled into a clearing and made for the middle of it. It was small, intimate, a good spot for a picnic. Ha! I had reached a dead end, a wall of rock in front of my path. It would take a moment to scale, and I would be vulnerable the whole time. More vulnerable than I was now. I turned and issued a challenge. "Wolf, make yourself known." I squealed in my prepubescent voice. It was as I had believed. Another twig snapping theatrically as the wolf stepped out from the foliage. It was a she-wolf. I remember distinctly her thick mat of fur around her neck, her hungry eyes, and the way her fangs looked as her lips curled back in a snarl. It was ceremony in my shallow understanding of the world that I warned her of my extreme powers. "I will kill you!" My threats fell on deaf ears. The wolf took a step forward. She would be quick, using her weight to throw me to the floor, my back in the wet grass, and my blood splurting from a sheared throat. I would bleed out, my eyes blinking several more times as I slowly left this world. Yes, she would be quick. Quick. My hand was naturally in my pocket from the beginning, a common practice among casters, fingering their ingredients, contemplating their next move. I found the string, and I knew at once what I must do. The wolf paced, zigzagging slowly toward me. She was making me used to movement, comforting me. Then she would leap when I was subdued. I waited, back pressed against the rock. She did as predicted. The wolf had closed the gap between us. She was less than 10 steps away. The predator, in the blink of an eye, leaned back, as if coiling like a spring, then leapt toward me. I channeled then, feeling the string weak from existence, from my pocket into the dimension all ingredients disappear to. I was face to face with the wolf. She floated toward me through the air, moving perhaps a centimeter a second. I had not put her in a form of stasis. Rather, I had slowed time around her. I had manipulated the threads of the fabric of destiny. No small feat for an 8-year-old, achievable given the right thread. If this were a regular tale for children by the bedside, I perhaps would narrate that the young hero let the she-wolf be, climbing the rock face and continuing on his mission. But there was no telling for certain how long the wolf would remain slowed. As well, you reader must be of an age to understand what could motivate my next actions. I scoured the field for the biggest rock I could find, and brained the wolf then and there. Now, covered in blood, I scaled the rocks and continued on. My last obstacle, much simpler in idea but harder in work, the mountain. The ground gradually rose for an hour, my small calves warning me of the incline before my eyes detected it. The ground became rockier, stones of varying sizes tripping me. I fingered the bone in my pocket, but held firm in my resolve to continue until it became obvious I needed it. I still had no inkling of what creature it could have been from. A wonderful benefit of magically shape-shifting is that while in the form of another creature, our human body rests and recuperates. With this understanding, I began ascending a game trail up the mountain and through its trees. The rock face to my left, an extreme angle, switchbacks, my only route up. The trail ended at a natural spring, and I gladly drank of it, as the taste would be better than what I could absorb from a plant. My muscles were screaming in agony, and my mind ached from my rapid ascent. It was time. Another sip, and I channeled through the bone. I was delighted again to find my assumption was correct. The ingredients did follow the pattern of the challenges. I had become a mountain goat, and I bleated with pleasure. Bah! I ascended the sheer rock with ease, and was over the mountain in no time. I was able to quickly descend as well. 3 ingredients, 3 challenges, and 3 successes. The quickest way out truly was through. I became myself again, and as I descended the heights I spotted the sea to the north. I was closing in on my goal, with time to spare. I was all smiles, and in my youthful arrogance I had failed to notice the birds had stopped chirping. An arrow pierced my arm, and I was thrown onto my back, rolling efficiently behind a fallen log as another arrow thumped the ground where I had just been. I listened to the sound of a sword being drawn from a scabbard, and in the Scanian language a man growled, "Come forth, boy, I mean to kill you. It is my only way home, according to the shaman." "Thank you, father," I muttered sarcastically, gripping my wound and biting my lip. I tore the arrow out and cast it aside. The potential murderer's footsteps drew nearer. It was surely the end for me. I was only aware of 3 trials and had exhausted what my father had provided, though the great book of magics had another saying I was fond of as well. Our power is within, our ingredients from without. From without I had collected the bone of a she-wolf. "I'm coming out. Please make the killing quick," I announced in rough Scanian. I stood then, hand in pocket. "No promises," the ragged man spat. He was blond of beard and had not bathed ever. I kicked myself for not smelling him sooner. I let him come toward me a few more paces, eyeing the quality of his sword. It was brittle iron, stubby. My arm was almost completely healed under my grip. My head ached with the effort. It was worth it. I would need the arm. "That's it. Fall on your knees." He was still suspicious, sword at the ready, foul grey tongue licking cracked lips. I could stand his image no more. I squeezed the wolf bone and transformed, sprinting forward. I ducked the sword blow and swatted it from his hand. He screamed as the claws of this form raked his flesh. Then I threw my weight in thick neck against his waist, knocking him over at the center of mass. It was his throat in my jaws next, and I ripped with ferocity. It was with 4 hours to spare that a wolf with a red snout wandered up to the sailboat on the northern coast. "Well done, boy." Arnis was truly proud. It showed in his eyes. He motioned to the boat, inviting me on as I transformed from wolf to boy. "What did you learn?" In the present I spoke. The quickest way out is through. I smiled, placing my hand on the lock of Saman's front door. It clicked and I tried the latch. Yes, it worked. I tensed, waiting for a wave of heat to wash over me as I entered the home, like waving a hand over a pot of boiling water. The heat did not come, however. The interior of the house was dark and cool. Curious. Normally homes left windows open so the breeze of night might flow through. This would be especially important in the desert. Yet I had checked the windows. They were all shut tight. The reason for this change in environment must be mechanical in nature. What this society lacked in magic they overcame with technology. Amazing, really. I had newfound respect for them, despite their weak-looking flesh and fat bodies. I closed the door, my superior eyes adjusting to the darkness quickly. To my left was a large slab of glass mounted to the wall, with a pinpoint red light ominously staring in my direction. A couch of many cushions and a chair to match were arranged to face the glass. Probably for meetings of some kind, just as the hermits had done with their smaller slabs. I waited, unmoving, waiting to see if the glass now would trigger an alarm of some kind, or contact the whistling cars. Nothing happened. I realized I had been holding my breath, and felt silly. Ahead of me was 2 options for navigation. A staircase and another room. Before I confronted Saman, I decided to try and learn more of his people. I chose the second room. It appeared to be a kitchen. Wash basin, pantry, and oven were available. I did not see a chimney outside, so this must all be operated by mechanical ingenuity. I found soiled dishes in the basin and a spigot of some kind. Curious. A well indoors? I handled one of the knobs. The spout produced water. Very curious. The letters C and H. I read the figures on each knob. I had twisted the C, now it was time to test the H. I held my hand in the stream of cold water, trying to detect a difference. Was it a well, or did a cold stream run under the homes? An underground river would explain where all this power was derived from. Perhaps the river pushed paddles which drove a fan, blowing air over ice and cooling the temperatures of the home. The river theory made sense. I retracted my hand quickly. The water had become scorchingly hot. I turned the knob to the off position. There must be an ongoing fire below the house to heat the water. I turned to what looked like a white elfin icebox found in the homes of the wealthy. It had a small door on top and a larger sister door below that. I opened the top one first, and air even colder than the ambient home temperature kissed my skin. I saw a tray of ice that had been individually cut into cubes. My lips sounded out a word. Ice cream. A box displayed 2 fit-looking young children, one clearly of Egyptian birth and one of Scanian origin. They both bore smiles, and held in their hands what looked to be a cone of bread with a piece of cheese on top. Ice cream would indicate something of dairy origin, chilled. I grasped the box, which appeared to be thin painted wood on sight, and explored it with my tactile senses. It was smooth, more like thick paper than wood. A narrower portion of the rectangular box had been folded closed, and I opened it. I removed what must be the bread cone and cheese from the vessel. It was wrapped in a paper-like material for a reason unknown to me. With my teeth I pried apart the covering and inspected the contents. This was strange cheese, cool to the touch and malleable. The bread was hard. My stomach growled. It had been some time since I had eaten. The torso of the small bird from earlier had left much to be desired. I tested the cheese first, a small nibble from the top. My senses were overwhelmed, a sweetness I had not known previously. It was as if the entire lump of cheese were made of hardened honey. I sampled the bread, equally as sweet. As if baked and glazed in the sugar powder I once tasted from a trader out of Persia. I put the ice cream back into its vessel and closed the box. Opening the second, larger compartment, I spotted immediately a glass jug of milk. While grasping it, I noticed the glass was not as I had predicted. It was light of weight. It was my initial instinct to gulp down the familiar liquid, but I had learned my lesson from the sweet cheese. I sipped from the jug. The milk was chilled, which was nice, but otherwise it tasted diluted. I could not detect the flavor of grass from which the cows engorged themselves. I drank then, deep and long. As my eyelids lowered in pleasure, my throat gurgled, and my stomach filled with the delicious milk. The landscape of the city filled my mind again. What massive farms they must have outside the city walls to sustain such a people. There must be millions of cows, the humming shacks, the cars. They must transport these jugs of milk across the walls into the markets. The milk receptacle was replaced, drained by my gullet. I belched, forgetting myself a moment. I was here in secret. I had to keep silent. I found a simple sandwich, half finished, and ate that. There were many more items packaged and unpackaged that I was unfamiliar with. There were vegetables I knew, and strange fruits of colors and shapes I did not. What struck me most about the kitchen was the cupboard full of spices. It was more than I had ever seen, even in the king's larders. This was a rich society indeed. It was time I ascended the stairs and confronted Seaman, the man-boy. I felt good, hydrated, and with a full stomach. I crept up the steps slowly, my eyes and ears on alert. Had I possessed the fur or paws of a cat, I would be able to traverse the path silently. But I had to rely on my own limbs until I built up my bag of ingredients. At the landing, I found myself on one end of a hallway. Closed double doors were directly ahead. A door to my left and one to my right sat centered in the middle. I continued my pace, not making a sound. I was glad for the fine construction of this abode. The carpeted floors did not creak when my weight was applied unevenly. I tried first the double doors and found myself in a large bedroom. The bed was massive. It was able to sleep 5. No one was in it. Curious. I moved back to the hall, into one of the single doors. In I walked and shut it quietly behind me. It was smaller by half, and in bed snored the outline of Seaman. Another glass slab sat on a stand upon a wardrobe, and on a desk sat another. A machine connected by strings to the desk slab hummed quietly. On the wall hung a banner of loyalty to the House Redbird. It was now that I would win Seaman to my side, as I had so many villagers of years past. They needed a show of power, to know I was not a crazed vagabond who had smoked too many mushrooms and concocted a vision of himself as a powerful wizard. I dug into my bag and pulled free several pebbles I had gathered and infused with a warding spell. I placed them in the corners of the room, granting us a bubble of silence for the show I would produce next. It was the man-boy's bedside I found myself then, and I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Wake up, young Seaman," I commanded. I spoke soothingly. Though young Seaman was anything but soothed. He yelled curses and attempted to swing fists at me. Like a monkey of Africa, he rose from the bed and spun wildly. He thrashed and I dodged. He put up more of a fight than I had imagined he would. It was time I put a stop to it. "Enough!" My voice boomed, the walls shaking. The neighborhood watch would have been alerted were it not for my wards. It worked. Seaman fell to the floor, propping himself up and shielding his eyes as I grew in size, and my skin began to glow as if I were on fire. A simple illusion. "You are in the presence of Grand Master Sovos of Alfheim, Lord Arcanist to the King Maralon." His legs were quaking in time with the furniture. "It is your submission I command, and your aid in my duties I require." Whoa, Seaman stuttered. "What is this? I'm dreaming!" He was crying, a common occurrence in those witnessing my immense power for the first time. You do not dream, man-boy. All you see is true." My palms opened to the ceiling, and I shot what only I knew to be harmless fire into the rafters. Seaman screamed, "Ah! Now do my bidding or face destruction. What say you?" I will!" he screamed. And with that I snapped my fingers, my volume lowering, my size reducing. I was normal once more. "Excellent," I smiled. "First I need a bed and some rest. In the morning I will require breakfast and a bath. Then you will teach me the powers of the cars." Seaman was panting, still on the floor. He was coming to his senses, the events that had just taken place finally coming together in his mind. I could have manipulated him, made a soulless servant of the boy, though I found people most useful and creative in tasks when their will and motivation were their own. "You really can do magic," he spoke. "Of course, Seaman. All I say is true and fact. I would not mislead you." Sean," was all he replied. He was correcting me. "What is this Sean?" I tried the word for the first time. "It's my name. My name is Sean, not Seaman." "You look more like a seaman to me. Sean will do. Now I am sure you have many questions, but I am weary from my travels. I require your hospitality." Sean nodded and stood. Wordlessly we returned downstairs. A blanket and a pillow were provided for me, and the couch was made into a bed. I laid down and got comfortable. Young Seaman sat in a chair opposite me, deep in thought. Sleep found me quickly, the ritual and the day having taken their toll upon my body.